I bought this grill back in 2019, assembled it in my kitchen, and it's been a beast ever since. But in May of 24, I started to have problems with it not getting as hot as it normally does. It stopped around 400 degrees when it usually got up to about 550. My assumption was it was the burners since they were rusted up pretty bad. So I figured it was time to replace all the old rusted parts and start fresh. I began my search for a parts kit online, which I'll go over in more detail next. But one thing I will mention, if you're having a similar problem as that, Silver Symbol recently posted a video about how it could be a stuck regulator and how to fix it. Basically, you just close the valve on the propane tank for about 30 seconds and it'll self-reset. Then when you go to turn it back on, you turn it on slowly in the beginning. This will help prevent the regulator from tripping. Before I go over the kit that I got, I want to provide a quick tip that may save you some money. If you're looking to replace your burners because they're not working correctly or damaged due to rust, Weber does warranty these burners for 10 years. It's a simple phone call to the number I have listed here. You just tell them your burners are damaged or rusted and that you need a new burner assembly. All they request from you is your grill's serial number and a couple pictures of the burners. When I called, they had already ordered the burners and had me a tracking number before I ever sent them pictures, so there's no real review of your pictures to make sure that's correct. It just seems to be more of a formality or part of the process. In other words, if you call, you will likely get a new burner assembly. When I get mine, I'll keep them as a spare since I wasn't aware of the warranty when I started this project. There's so many different kits available, it's a bit overwhelming, but I ran across a video on Handy Dad TV's YouTube channel that went into detail on his install. My thought was, same grill, his worked, I'll give it a go. That kit is the Uniflasy kit, and I'll leave a link in the description in case you want to give it a try too. While I was waiting on the package to arrive, I was reading Amazon reviews, and a lot of folks complained that their burners from this kit were smaller than the Weber originals, so they had to return them. Handy didn't mention that in his video, so I will go into a little bit more detail during my install, but they are correct. The burners are a different size. Here's the box they arrived in, a quick shot or two of everything included. I read the stainless steel vaporizer bars will not rust, so I'm excited to try those out. I wanted to include this discussion first because this is where I got discouraged and paused my refurbished project. When starting the disassembly process, the impulse is to start unscrewing all the parts you want to remove, and the first set of screws that you encounter are the ones in the cook box holding the burners in place. Mine, like most other videos I've seen, are extremely rusted due to the high temperatures they've encountered, and they even disintegrate when you try to remove them. I went out and bought an Irwin screw extractor set in anticipation that I need to use this to remove those screws, but know this, you do not, and I repeat, do not have to remove these screws. They only prevent the burners from raising up out of place. They aren't securing them down. In the next steps, you'll see the correct order to remove the parts and how easily the burners come out without worrying about these rusted screws. Now it's time for the disassembly, but the first thing we want to do is make sure the propane tank is off, and then we'll go ahead and remove the hose and regulator from the tank. Safety first. Then while we're down here, we'll go ahead and remove the igniter module. Do this by removing the two Phillips screws on the outside. Then once on the inside, take a couple pictures that show how it was plugged up and how the wires ran through the grill. This may come in handy. Then unplug the 4 wires that come from the igniter button and the igniter electrode. Wiggle back and forth gently until they release. Now that we have it removed, we want to place the igniter module with its screws in a safe place so we can keep up with what screws and bolts go with each piece. Now let's remove the grill grates and the flavor bars. These things have seen better days, but they did last about 5 years, so not so bad. Now I'll quickly show you what the flame looks like on these old burners. It's hard to see in the daylight, but it's not a consistent burn like it should be, which is the reason this is being done. Next, I'll be removing the control panel. To do that, I need access to the 3 screws located under the control knobs. Those knobs just slide off. And here's a quick tip. These screws may be rusted on, so you want to apply some WD-40 as early in the process as possible. Nothing too difficult here, just 3 Phillips head screws, but the goal is to not lose any of them like I almost did here. Alright, crisis averted. Here are our 3 screws. You may now think it's time to remove the control panel, but there are 2 more screws located underneath. One's here, and the other one's over there. Now that all 5 screws are removed, the control panel is only being held on by clips on each side. We need to gently lift straight up. However, we want to be careful because the wire to the igniter button is still secured to its clips in the cabinet. To remove the igniter electrode, you just pull straight back. The igniter button wires give us just enough slack to set the panel aside and investigate further. This is a closer look at the igniter electrode and how it's installed and or removed. Make note of how straight that electrode was. That'll be discussed a bit more later on. Now we can go into the cabinet and remove the electrode and igniter button wires from their clips. This could have been done back in the igniter box removal step, but I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself. Now that we have the control panel successfully removed, let's take a quick look at how the burners are secured. As you can tell, they sit freely inside the holes, and the only thing holding them up are the valves on the manifold assembly. They're actually just laying on the valves. So in order to remove, we have to remove the 2 screws and the 2 bolts securing the manifold assembly, and then we can pull it back. To remove this bolt, you can use a combination wrench, or like I did, an adjustable wrench. Depending on how tight yours is, you may need 2 tools, but I was able to hold the nut with my hand and break it with the adjustable wrench. Once you get it loose enough, you can unscrew the nut by hand. Just be careful because you have a nut and a washer that'll be easy to lose if you drop it. Kinda like I almost did here. Again, set your hardware in a safe place so you don't lose them, and so you know which part of the grill they go back on. Now that the screws and bolts are removed from the gas valve assembly, you can pull it away from the burners and set it aside. The hose is still attached, so be gentle. With it out of the way, you can pull the burners towards you and free them from the rusted screws holding them down. And just like that, we have removed all the replaceable items from the grill, and now is a good time to clean it up a bit. There's a lot of good videos out there on deep cleaning grills. I'm not going to get that OCD into it, but I am going to use a plastic scraper to remove as much of the buildup as possible. Knocking everything down into the bottom grease tray seems like a good idea. That looks good to me. Now let's pull the tray and dump this nastiness into the trash. There's a lot of buildup on the tray itself, so I'll scrape that away the best I can, and then I may give it a water and Dawn dish soap soak while we finish up. This is the aluminum grease catch pan, and it looks like at some point I made a good decision and added a liner. But before I did that, it looks like I used it without one for a while. I'll leave a link to some cheap liners for this pan in the description. While we're here, let's go ahead and address the buildup on the pan. The best way to clean it is to add some Dawn dish soap and water and let it soak. I believe I let it soak overnight, then used my scraper the next morning, and it was back to looking new. Well, newish. Next, I'll put the finishing touches on the grill box by using my shop vac to get anything the scraper missed. Then we'll put together a soak for the bottom grease tray and the warming rack. The soak is just water and dish soap. We'll then let those both soak overnight. Here's everything the kit came with. Let's give it a quick inspection. The first thing I noticed, which I read a comment about on Amazon, is the igniter electrode is bent down. I even saw another video where this bend caused issues igniting after it was installed. And then for the other concern I had, are the burners really shorter than the originals? And they are, by quite a bit. This was concerning enough to me that I'm not going to install the kit's igniter button, igniter, and igniter box in fear that I'll have to send everything back if the burners don't work right. But that's okay because all my originals were working fine. It looks like 2 or a 1/16 of an inch off, but there is one that's a full 1/8 of an inch off. And as you can see from the ledge they sit on, an 1/8 may cause some issues. Now it's time for the reassembly. This is the old igniter module, which is working fine. Since we'll be using it again, we do want to change the batteries though. Then we'll use the Uniflasy module as a spare if we end up keeping everything. That'll be determined after we get the burners installed and tested. To install the igniter module, it's just 2 screws, but it is a little awkward reaching around the cabinet door to hold the module while you get the screws started. Alright, that's installed. Now let's check those burners out. I'm curious if the size difference will cause an issue like in the Amazon comments, or if it's manageable like in the couple of YouTube videos that are out there. The assembly hole locations as well as the flame openings tell you which burner goes where. There's only one way to assemble it. The order of operations is you just feed it through the hole first, then attach the crossover burner, then slide it under the screw. I haven't screwed it in yet, but at first glance I'm not liking how far away the valve is from the burner opening when the burner is all the way under the screw on the other side. The middle one seems to be okay. To install the gas control valve assembly, we have 2 screws on the bottom, then the 2 bolts that go into the cook box. One thing I realized here is the screws cannot be completely tightened down yet or the holes for the bolts won't line up. So I had to back the screws out a couple of turns, which allowed the bolts to be inserted. Here it's important to remember there is a lock washer you have to use, and it goes on the same side as the nut. Get the nuts finger tight, then go back and tighten down the screws. Then use a wrench on the bolts to finish them up. Now that we have everything installed, let's test out the Uniflasy burners to see if the size difference is a concern. I'm not sure if the burner on the end was the shortest or if it's the angle of the gas control assembly, but as you can tell in these clips, it pulled all the way towards the valve. It can slide off the mounting area on the other side. The concern with that is it may cause cooking issues on that side, but the main thing to consider and to make sure of is that it doesn't fall off the valve if pushed all the way the other way. That could cause flames to get into the control panel, which would not be good, but it looks like it's tight enough to prevent that. While I think the burners will be fine, I'll still keep the Uniflasy igniter button, module, and electrode as spares, but I did want to show you how to remove the button in case you're changing everything out. There are 2 clips on each side of the button. Just press those in and it slides right out. Then, to reinstall, you just press the button in and it pops into place. Then, to install the burner electrode, slide it into place on the first burner, then feed the wires into the cabinet. If you're installing the Uniflasy electrode, you may have to come back later and straighten out the electrode after you test it. Now it's time to install the control panel. Feed the button wire into the cabinet, then secure the panel on the 2 clips. From there, install the 3 screws on the face of the panel, then the 2 underneath. Now let's hook up the igniter module. There are 2 clips that run inside the cabinet, so we'll start by tucking our wires away. The igniter electrode wires are white with a yellow cover and all black. Those 2 wires go in the top of the igniter module. The igniter button has 2 black wires and they connect to the bottom of the igniter module. There's no right or wrong slot for these and they can be switched around, so don't worry. And after a quick test, it is working. Now we'll get the knobs back on and attach the regulator to the propane tank. Now it's finally time to test if everything is working properly and what type of flame we get out of these new burners. I know it's hard to see here in the daylight, but it's a much better burn than what we're getting with the old rusted originals. Only time will tell if the Uniflasy burners are a good buy, but I think we did at least establish that the shorter length is not an issue. After I use it for a few months, if I find any issues, I'll be sure to include a short, so subscribe to check that out. And if I do, I can quickly switch it out with the Weber replacements I just received. Another step you want to do after you get everything installed is put a few drops of dish soap in a spray bottle with water and spray down your regulator and hose at all the connections. Then turn on the propane. If there are any leaks, you should see bubbles. Alright, I didn't see any bubbles on mine, so I think we're good to go. Now we can put on the finishing touches. We've got the lower grease trap still soaking, and since everything is as loose as it's going to get, we'll give it a quick scrape, and wow, look how nasty this water is. Now we can install the catch pan, which we'll put a liner in later, then the lower grease trap, then our brand new stainless steel flavor bars. And one last test with the new burners and flavor bars. We'll see if we can get up to 550 degrees on a 15-minute preheat. And yep, perfect. And the last thing to do is season our new grates. I do have a short dedicated to seasoning these grates, and I'll leave a link in the description. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll leave you with some footage of my vicious guard dogs. And now that everything is working fine, let's give it a quick wipe down with our Dawn dish soap multi-purpose cleaner.